with Flawless Magic. So in this video we're going to talk about how to determine the number of spells you should run of each cost, so that you draw them when you need them and you don't draw them when you don't need them. For instance, you don't want to be the guy running a deck that has too many 5-drops because you think they're powerful, but then for the most of the game you have 5-drops sitting in your hand and they're just useless because it takes you forever to get to 5 land. And at the same time, you don't necessarily want to go to the other extreme and run all 1-drops for the sake of efficiency and being guaranteed to cast your cards, because then your cards are probably all going to be too underpowered to actually do much. So what we're going to do is we're going to do, let's see, number of land needed. We'll do turns to X land, and we'll do spells less than or equal to land. So if we do number of land, and I'll go up to as high as 7, and if we do, so turns to X land is going to be this times 60 divided by 24 is going to give us the number of cards we need. And we could leave it that way, cards to X land, but I like to put it in terms of turns. It's just me. And so you end up with a negative number here because we open with 7 cards, and you're actually so likely to draw at least 1 land in a 24 land deck that you're in essence drawing it before turn 1. I know it doesn't make sense, but just go with it. So if we want to figure out how many spells we need to draw so that we're likely to draw the land we need for the spell before we draw the spell itself, we're going to do 1 times 60 divided by, and then this is the number of turns. It's also the number of cards we need if we add 6 back. So you can see for 1-drops, the most you could run and be likely to draw the number of land you need before you draw the 1-drop is also 24, which makes sense because you only need 1 land for it. Now if I take this same formula and we'll set this static and drag it down, you see that it reduces over time. Another useful thing to need is the number of spells you need to draw at least 1 on each turn. So this is regardless of whether or not you have the land. This is just you want to draw it on such and such turn. Still 1 times 60 divided by, we'll consider this to be synonymous with the number of turns, and you get these numbers, and that one makes no sense. Hold this static. You get these numbers. So basically, general pattern of starting out high and tapering pretty quickly. High and tapering pretty quickly. What I tend to do is go with the minimum from these two. Okay, so let's say we're building our deck. We already know that we want to run 24 land. So we'll do L 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is actually saying that we can run a lot of cards in that top slot, but I caution you against running too many high-costed cards because, the minimum here, yeah, it's 3.2. You would probably round down, but 3 7-drops, again, with the mean form of the hypergeometric distribution, it's taken into consideration averages, but that's saying that 63% of the time you'll draw the land by this turn, and on average this is the number of cards you need to not draw the spell until that turn. But 63% is a pretty big margin of error, and I'll show you in upcoming videos how to control exactly what the likelihood is by looking at the actual probability of drawing a certain number of cards. But be very cautious. I like to, in this sense, think of things as like early, middle, and late game. So I would generally, if it's me, break it down into kind of this sort of thing, where you have early or developing cards, you have middle game cards, you have late game cards, and you have very late game cards. And if you were running anything beyond 7, it would also qualify as very late, just because most formats are pretty fast. You know, even having considerable 5 drops is often rare. Usually this is where most zones operate. So I would encourage you to probably start there. So the minimum here for 4 drops, you've got 6. For 3 drops, you've got 6.6. We're going to round down for now. Now here, actually, yeah, let's round up here, because you can have as many as 8 and still be more likely to draw the land itself. In fact, I would tend to go 8, 12, and since we're running equals 60 minus 24 minus the sum of these guys, yeah, do it. So if we did something like this, where we did maximum 2, 3, and 4 drop slots, which are really the money makers of most decks, we only have 10 cards left to assign. If I really wanted to go high, I could do, you know, some up in here. I don't recommend doing all of these, because again, you increase the odds of having cards in your hand that you just can't use. So what I would recommend is maybe doing 2 5 drops, and then you could put the rest into the 1 drop slot, and you could always move things down from here. But you can see things are going to be mostly general, but if you like tweaked it around, okay, now things change. The number of 4 drops you can run drops, the number of 3 drops you can run drops, and it doesn't happen significantly enough with the mean equation, but all of these should drop off fairly substantially. And then, of course, if you were running more of a control-y deck, we'll say you go up to like 28. Well, now you're drawing your lands for your 5 drop even faster, and you're likely to be able to play higher costed cards. So it all depends on the number of land you're running, and if you've already figured out your creatures, you can use this to figure out the number of land. But try and keep a curve that's similar to this. Usually it's going to, if it has any 1 drops, it's going to be fairly low, just because they're typically underpowered unless you're running a very aggressive deck. Then it's going to peak usually in the 2 or 3 drop slot. Another option here would be to only run 4 here, and you could increase this to 12, especially if you make these 4 mana rampers, like some kind of elf that taps for green. You have flexibility, and again, it comes down to what your strategy is and what you're going for. If you're doing a lot of mana ramp, like if you have ramp here and rampers here as well, like Sylvan Caryatid or something, then you can start pushing into the higher costed cards. So I'm sorry that this method isn't really that precise and doesn't give you all the answers. The more in-depth method that I'll share with you later will kind of take away some of that doubt. But for now, you can kind of see a good way to estimate how many cards you should be running of each mana cost, and hopefully this is enough to get you started in the right direction for now.